Your church needs you. It needs you out on life's racetrack, running alongside the other members to get the job done together. The challenge for the new year is get involved. That's what Esther did at a crucial point in the history of the Jewish people. She got involved, even at great personal risk, as must we, to face the daunting challenges of 2008. Stay with us. From Chicago's Moody Church, this is Running to Win with Dr. Erwin Lutzer, whose clear teaching helps us make it across the finish line. Today, Dr. Lutzer concludes his message on For Such a Time as This, the story of Esther, a woman whose taking of a great risk gives us an example to follow.
I see not only that we are together and that we are divinely appointed to be together, but also we are divinely appointed to take risks for God. You'll notice that Esther said, if I perish, I perish. That wasn't a very hopeful statement, was it? You know what I believe? I think that Esther expected to die, but she says, either way I'm probably going to die if it gets found out that I'm a Jewess and this decree goes through. So if I'm going to die, I'm going to die. Avati, avati. Not a whole lot of faith. As it was, God spared her, and what an awesome story the rest of the book is that you can read this afternoon or sometime this week. Because Esther does go into the king, and she does speak to Xerxes, who was the man who ordered that a bridge be built across the Hellespont, and when it blew down, he asked that the 300 workmen who worked on it be put to death. This was the king who, when a friend of his came and said, I would like to give you what in our terms is about $5.5 million, the king gladly accepted it and then returned it with a gift of praise and adoration. But when the same man asked that his son be exempt from military service, Xerxes had the boy cut in two, and the armies of Persia marched between the two pieces. This was that kind of a man. And Esther went into him, and she received him, and how the whole story turned around as a result of it is something that I don't have time to tell you, but it's there in the Word of God, and you can read it for yourself. But here's my point. When Esther took the risk to go into the king, she had no real assurance that this was going to work. But she had asked for fasting and prayer. And because she asked for fasting and prayer, she was willing to take that risk and to say, by God's grace, I'm going to try it and depend on Him while I am doing it. And she interceded. Let me ask you something. Are you an intercessor? I mentioned that a moment ago. Are you an intercessor? I want you to know I attended prayer meeting on Wednesday evening, and I was in a group where some of them had gone to Romania. What an exciting time. I can hardly wait for the report. Did you know that when our team went to Romania for 10 days, there were about 55 people praying around the clock. The idea was 24 hours of prayer per day, even though they didn't quite reach that. I'd like to know what hours of the morning perhaps were left absent. But nevertheless, can you imagine all that prayer? And here we're going to have the privilege of hearing what God did through their ministry in Romania. I want you to know this, that when we begin to intercede as a church, when we begin to pray, God is going to do things above and beyond what we can ask or think, and we will begin to see His hand in ways that we could never describe in a bulletin. I've always said that when I prepare the bulletin, oh God, this is what we are planning, but please don't be limited with what we are planning, because the real thing that Moody Church does, the real ministry of the Moody Church is so much beyond the bulletin. And I want you to know today that as a people, we must always keep before us the supernaturalness of God and believe Him for greater things. Because we have been led to the kingdom just for such a time as this. And what we need to do is expand our knowledge of His promises and our knowledge of His ability. And to say, God, we don't understand it all. Sometimes our hearts flutter because we are in doubt and disbelief. But oh God, avati, avati, if we perish, we perish. But we must do what we must do. For you have called us to work together in this great and wonderful city. Another story from Alaska. We were shown a videotape about the Serum Run, 1925. Any of you remember it? I don't. Get the picture. Nome, Alaska. School children dying every single day because of diphtheria. No way to get the serum to them. No planes in those days, no boats. The coast is frozen. So what they decided to do, Fairbanks to Nome, Alaska, 684 miles, they decided to run it with dog sleds, and America and the world really, through the press, kept abreast of what was happening. They began with a precious serum which needed to be kept cold and also needed heating occasionally along the way, I'm told. But they began with this precious serum, and they took those 684 miles, and 127.5 hours later, they arrived in Nome to save the lives of the children who were dying of diphtheria. But what courage, what ambition these people had. They used about 20 different dog sleds. And you see, they went from point to point, and men were available at every point waiting with their dogs to take the serum so that they could go day and night without stopping. In fact, the lead dog that made it into Nome has a statue in Central Park in New York. So anyway, as I began to think about this serum run, a couple of things began to dawn on me. Number one, it was a team effort, believe me. Everybody was in it together. The scientists who prepared the serum. Then, of course, there were all of the men that were involved. There were the dogs involved, but there were also the families that were involved because they said goodbye to their husbands who were willing to take incredible risks over the snow, over mountains, over lakes to do it. Number two, it dawned on me that there was a lot of risk involved. In fact, there was one man whose stretch was over a lake, and they did not know whether the ice on the lake was, in the middle of the lake, was even strong enough to hold him. The other option was to go around a mountain, but he felt that going across the mountain around the side may not even have been possible given the deep snow, and even if it were possible, he felt that it would slow down the precious serum that needed to get to dying children. And so he went across the lake. Another thing dawned on me as I was thinking about it, and that is that the thanks for having gotten the serum there was unevenly distributed. Because the last man who was supposed to take the serum